If you've ever wished you could double or even triple the number of books that you finish in a year, or if you've ever wanted to turn a commute, a workout, or even chores into reading time, or if you've ever wondered whether listening to a book counts as reading, if so, then today's video just might be for you. Today, I will be reviewing audiobooks, like all of them. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and as the name suggests, I read it all. I read fiction, nonfiction, classics, brand new releases, even the occasional obscure gem. Then I bring those books here to the channel to share my thoughts and help you decide who each book might be for. Today though, I'm kicking off something a little different. A full playlist dedicated to audiobooks. Where, how, and why to listen to them. Now, I've already dipped my toes into the world of audiobooks here on the channel with a couple of videos. One on how to use Spotify for audiobooks. Please check that out if you're interested. And then another where I shared what I believe to be a nuanced take on the whole audiobooks versus reading debate. Not everyone liked that one as much, but if you're interested, go check that one out too. But I've wanted for a long time to build something more structured, a full playlist that explores audiobooks from many angles. So in this series, I'll be looking back at the history of audiobooks. I will explore the best ways to get your hands on them, and I would like to talk about the current state of the audiobook world and even think ahead to the future, especially when it comes to AI narration and questions of intellectual property control. This playlist is meant to be your one-stop shop for everything audiobooks. This video in particular is meant as an introduction to the playlist with a little bit of history about audiobooks and a list of the places I go to get audiobooks. However, the plan is to cover each of those sources in their own videos, and I'm always interested in new legal ways of getting more access. I will put an emphasis on the legal, please. I know that a lot of people have some less than legal means of getting access to audiobooks, and I'm not here to judge you, but that is definitely not what I will be presenting here. Audiobooks might feel like a recent invention, but they've actually been around for nearly a century. The very first versions appeared in the 1930s when the American Foundation for the Blind began recording talking books on vinyl records for people with vision impairments. But vinyl was expensive, fragile, and each record only held about 15 minutes of audio, which meant a single book required a huge stack of records, so only specialty libraries carried them, and the number of available titles was very limited. Things improved with cassette tapes in the 1970s. Cassettes were far more durable, held much more audio than vinyl, and cassette players were everywhere. But full books still took up a lot of space, sometimes filling entire binders with the cassette tapes. That gave rise to abridged versions of audiobooks, edited down so they could fit on just a couple of tapes. Even then, they were still many times more expensive than a printed book. But libraries began carrying a much wider selection, making them more accessible to the public. In the 1990s, CDs made another leap forward. They were cheaper to produce, more compact than cassettes, and the sound quality was better. CDs really helped popularize what people often called books on tape. I personally have a lot of fond memories of listening to audiobook CDs that we checked out from our local library on long car rides, especially with my family. Harry Potter was the most popular in our rotation. My dad did most of the driving, but if he ever switched drivers and took a nap, he would usually make us rewind back to the spot where he had left off, even if the rest of us had kept listening without him. Then came the digital age. Even today, many libraries still have large CD audiobook collections, and some offer portable MP3 players with a single audiobook loaded onto them called playaways, or there's probably a variety of other versions of that. However, digital downloads and streaming though, they have completely changed the game. Now you can listen through platforms like Audible, Everand, Spotify, or Apple Music. But for bibliophiles like me, who go through far too many books in a year to buy all of them, the real revolution has been how libraries embraced streaming. Overdrive was one of the first big library services, and its successor Libby has become the most popular library app for audiobooks today. Some libraries also use things like Canopy and other platforms, giving readers legal access to huge collections without, of course, the high price tag. And with the rise in accessibility has come a huge increase in production. Not every book gets an audiobook edition, but far more do now than in the days of vinyl, cassettes, or even CDs. That growth is part of what makes this playlist possible. I'll be breaking down the different platforms I use to find audiobooks, with some services like Libby even getting multiple videos because there's just way too much to cover. Let's talk about the many ways to actually get access to audiobooks. I'm going to name as many as I know of or have read about. Some of these I use all the time, some I've only dabbled in, and some I haven't really explored yet. And here's where I'd love your help. Please, please let me know in the comments if there's a service I left out and also which one you prefer. For me, my number one source by far is Libby. That'll get quite a few videos. We will, of course, go into more detail about that, but it is where I get the majority of my audiobooks, and honestly, it's one of my favorite apps overall. After that, I do also use Audible, not just for the books that I've purchased, but also for the large number of titles that are included with their subscription. I make it a point to use Spotify every month too, making sure that I get the full use of those 15 free audiobook hours. I also find myself turning to YouTube when I'm looking for recordings of older works, especially those in the public domain. And interestingly, I've actually listened to a fair amount through podcast shows like Phoebe Reads a Mystery, which has covered dozens of books, or even Planet Money, which has released their own readings of public domain works like The Great Gatsby. Of course, there are plenty of other platforms out there. On the paid side, there's stuff like Everand, which you might remember as Scribd, and then it got actually changed in a couple different services. There's Libro.fm, there's Audiobooks.com, Google Play Books, Apple Books, Kobo Audiobooks, and Chirp, which focuses on discounted titles. I actually don't know on that one very well, but I look forward to finding out more about it. Then there are, of course, streaming platforms where audiobooks are bundled in with other services like Apple Music, YouTube Music, or Kindle Unlimited for certain titles, and of course Spotify, which I've already mentioned and is one of the big ones that I do use. Libraries also remain one of the best ways to listen. So besides Libby, there's stuff like Hoopla, Canopy, Cloud Library, and even classic CD audiobooks, or those preloaded playaways that I've already mentioned. Those are all wonderful ways to still listen to audiobooks, and you can still find them in many libraries. Beyond that, you've got free public domain options like LibriVox. You have specialty publishers like Graphic Audio or Big Finish with full cast productions, and educational platforms like The Great Courses or Wondrium. I have my own playlist for Great Courses works because even though they are not technically books, they still, at least in audiobook quality, require just as much time and energy to listen to, and I personally get a lot out of them. And you can find all sorts of specialty audiobook platforms, some of which I'll cover. I can only think of one that I regularly use, but I know that there is going to be probably a platform for almost any kind of major book or genre specialty out there. So that's the wide landscape. In future videos, I'll be digging deeper into many of these sources. And like I said, some of them like Libby and Audible, they will probably give me multiple videos, not just to give you more tips and tricks on how to use them, but a little bit more about the discussion of what are the challenges of them. And we'll of course be going into more details about that. But don't forget, I really, really want to hear from you. I want to know what is your favorite way to get audiobooks, and I especially want to know if there is one of these platforms that I left out that you just find invaluable, that you think that I need to know about, and I would love to explore it. Please let me know in the comments. This is a place to get the conversation going. So before I go, as I do with all my reviews, I would like to have my usual sections of who is this book for, or in this case, who are audiobooks for, and then who are audiobooks not for. So who are audiobooks for? Honestly, in my opinion, almost everyone. They're perfect for busy people who want to fit more reading into their lives, commuters, parents, students, or anyone who feels like they just don't have time to sit down with a physical book. They're also great for people who learn best through listening. Some find it easier to absorb ideas when they hear them out loud rather than seeing them on the page. And of course, audiobooks remain a vital resource for people with visual impairments or reading difficulties like dyslexia. They also make reading more flexible. You can pair them with another activity, cleaning, cooking, exercising, driving, all without putting a pause on your reading goals. For me, that ability to multitask is one of the biggest strengths of audiobooks. And sometimes it's not just about convenience. A great narrator can actually elevate a story, adding personality and emotion and nuance that you might miss on the page when reading it yourself. Some narrators become as much a draw as the book itself. Of course, case in point for that would be Jim Dale and the Harry Potter series, which I grew up listening to, and although I've always loved reading, he certainly made it a dramatically different experience with his reading of Harry Potter. In short, audiobooks are for anyone who wants to expand their reading life, whether it's about accessibility, efficiency, or just the joy of hearing a story performed well. Who are audiobooks not for? Of course, audiobooks aren't for everyone. If you're the kind of reader who loves physically holding a book or turning the pages or seeing the words on paper, audiobooks may not scratch that itch. Some people just need that visual connection to feel like they're really reading, and I don't blame them. Audiobooks also might not be the best fit for people who struggle to focus when listening. Not all of us are audio learners. If your mind tends to wander, and let's be honest, mine certainly does, you might find yourself realizing you've just missed the last 10 minutes of the story. Whole new characters can be introduced in that time, and major plot twists can all happen at a time that you are momentarily distracted. That happens. They can also be tricky for readers who like to pause and underline passages, like to take notes or flip back and forth easily. Sure, you can bookmark an audiobook, but it's just not quite the same as dog-earing a page or scribbling in the margins. And finally, some people just prefer the quiet. Audiobooks do bring another voice not only into your head, they also can redefine how you are reading things in a book. They give a new voice to what you may have given a completely different sounding voice or a completely different context. I've actually heard several very popular authors talk about how they cannot listen to their audiobooks because the person reading it just has a completely different interpretation than what they expected. And I think that's understandable. If you have your way of engaging with books and it doesn't necessarily include listening to a narrator, I think that's fine. I am a big proponent of everyone consuming more books, whether that is physically reading them or listening to them, and I'm here to help in any way that I can. So while I think audiobooks can work for just about anyone, they're not going to be the perfect solution for every kind of reader or in every situation. But that's my quick introduction to this new playlist all about audiobooks. We've touched on a little bit of history, some of the ways you can get access, and who audiobooks might be for and who they might not be so perfect for. In the weeks ahead, I'll be diving deeper into specific services like Libby, Audible, Spotify, and much more. My hope is that this playlist will be both a guide and a conversation starter because the audiobook world is constantly changing, especially with questions about AI narration and copyright that is very much still up in the air. If you love audiobooks or if you're just curious about them, I'd love for you to stick around. I have plenty more content here on the channel too, everything from great courses, lectures, to reviews of Pulitzer Prize winners and finalists, plus a wide variety of fiction and nonfiction, and I want this to be a conversation. So please let me know in the comments about audiobook services you use, or if there's one I've missed that I need to check out. Please also share my videos. The more people that know about my channel, the more fruitful and productive this conversation can be, and the more videos I can make. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and whether it's an audiobook or a physical book, until next time, keep those pages turning.